What's up, Night Owl? Steely here, back with another Witchlight video, and today we're going to be going over Chapter 1, the Witchlight Carnival. This video is intended for Dungeon Masters who are planning on running the Wild Beyond the Witchlight campaign module. If you're a player in a Witchlight game, there's spoilers ahead. The premise of this chapter is that the party goes to the Witchlight Carnival for reasons that I discussed in a previous video, looking for a portal into the Domain of Delight, Prismeer. From my experience, the Witchlight Carnival fills out a single 4-hour session perfectly. This is of course dependent on the DM and how you give out information, and the players and what they do with it, but even my slowest groups were moving into Prismeer after a full session within the carnival. Now, as for DM prep, I do believe that this chapter is the hardest to prepare for as the DM, just given the nature of the carnival and how open it is and how every location is available to the party as soon as they walk into the carnival, and you have no way of knowing which way they're going to go. They may go left, they may go right. There's a ton of NPCs manning all of these locations, and you need to be ready for them to interact with the party. So in my opinion, this chapter may be the hardest to prepare for, just based off of all of the information that you have, and some of it may not even get used. But that's what this video is for. The best way to prepare to run this chapter and to not get overwhelmed from all of the locations and the information and the NPCs is to work backwards from the end result. Every single decision that the party makes will eventually converge on this one result, and that's opening up the portal into Prismeer and walking through. You can build your prep work foundation on that fact alone, because if that doesn't happen, you're not even running Witchlight anymore. In order to open that portal into Prismeer, the party's going to need to learn the passphrase, hither, thither, here and there, wander yonder, show me where. By the book, there's only 2 NPCs that know how to open this portal. Mr. Witch, although it's not much of a stretch to assume that Mr. Light knows as well, and Eliwick Tumblestrom. You want to treat Eliwick as sort of a wild card. In case anything and everything goes wrong and the party burns the carnival to the ground, Eliwick will be there to push the campaign forward. I'll make a special note here that the Hourglass Coven, the primary villains of this campaign, a coven of hags, send thieves into the carnival in order to steal objects and to kidnap people. If these thieves use the passphrase to get in and out of Prismeer, then it's possible the party could stake out the Hall of Illusions and see one of them use the passphrase and learn that way. But I recommend treating these thieves as foreshadowing rather than NPCs to interact with. This leaves Mr. Witch and Mr. Light as the keys to getting to the next chapter. In order to convince Mr. Witch and Mr. Light to show the party how to get into Prismeer, the party has to blackmail them by stealing Mr. Witch's pocket watch or Mr. Light's scepter. This plan is presented to the party by a bugbear named Burley, who has worked at the carnival his entire life, and his brother is actually one of the victims that has been kidnapped by the Hourglass Thieves. Burley will meet with the party and escort them to a meeting with Witch and Light after the Big Top Extravaganza, or once the carnival's mood reaches its highest or lowest point. There's not much to note about this meeting. Witch and Light just want to meet with the party and ask them a few questions about their visit with the carnival. They may also bring up details about the starting quest you chose. After the meeting, Burley suggests stealing Mr. Witch's pocket watch in order to gain leverage over them. In my opinion, this plan isn't great. It's a bit off-putting and weird given the context of the carnival itself, and I have a different solution for the party learning the passphrase and getting into Prismeer. There are a few opportunities throughout the carnival where the party can gather information about what's going on behind the scenes. For one, there's the carousel, which if the party solves that puzzle, they'll gather a ton of information about the Hourglass Coven. And if they interrogate Kettlestein by chasing down the Kinku throughout the carnival, they'll gather a bunch of information about Mr. Witch and Mr. Light's relationship with the Hourglass Coven. In my opinion, these 2 events give the party more than enough information to convince Mr. Witch and Mr. Light to let them go to Prismeer and deal with the Hourglass Coven. It's in their best interest, after all. If the party happens to gather all of this information before they ever meet with Mr. Witch and Mr. Light, and then they present this information to them and tell them everything they know, I would suggest having Mr. Witch and Light meet with the party at the Hall of Illusions after the crowning of the monarch. This gives the party an opportunity to spend more time in the carnival and to actually be crowned the monarch. If that doesn't interest you or you don't think your party would be up for it, you could have Witch and Light give the party the passphrase right away at the meeting when they're confronted with the information that the party knows from the carousel and Kettlestein. They learn the passphrase and they can go straight to Prismeer. Or if you have a more combat-focused group or a group that's not really interested in the carnival and just ready to move forward with the quest, there are some groups out there like that. You could have Kettlestein know the passphrase and tell the party once Kettlesteam's been interrogated and then the party can move on that way without ever meeting Witch and Light. These are just some suggestions. I'm not a huge fan of the heist where the party has to steal the pocket watch or the scepter in order to convince them to tell them how to get to Prismeer. Also, if the party goes into the meeting with Mr. Witch and Mr. Light, knowing about the Hourglass Coven, knowing about the conversation that Kettlesteam overheard, there's no way that they can convince the party of their ignorance, and you might as well move forward with the campaign, which is why I suggest doing so after the crowning of the monarch. Everything that I've covered up to this point in the video is what I would consider the essentials for prepping for this chapter. From here on, I'm just going to be doing a general overview of the carnival and the carnival games, starting with tracking time and mood. Time is pretty simple. Assuming that your party is going to spend one night at the carnival and that you'll end your first session as they enter Prismeer, you can treat that clock as the session clock. They could end up going to Prismeer early or coming back to the carnival the next day. This is just a general assumption. Other than that, just move that token along the clock as you see fit and as the party plays games. I would treat this clock as a plot point, not a literal timer. The mood tracker is a bit different. As your party interacts with the carnival, they can influence the mood for better or for worse. This is because the Feywild is closely connected to emotion, and the carnival is closely connected to the Feywild. This means emotion is a strong driving force within the carnival. If your party brings good vibes, it will have a positive impact on the carnival. If they have bad vibes, it will have a negative impact. I strongly suggest that every time the mood shifts, you make it very obvious what's causing that shift and how it's impacting the carnival. If the party saves the dwarf from the dragonflies or returns the child to the lost property, you can describe their emotions that they have for being saved. Like maybe the dwarf will hug one of the party members and they can feel the warmth and they can see the colors start to become more vibrant as they're being embraced by this dwarf. Or they see the child reunite with their parent and flowers start to blossom around them as they see all this warmth coming off of them. And the same can go with the opposite direction. For example, if a party member pickpockets one of the guests at the carnival, maybe that object that they stole has a dull gray look to it. And there's like this cold chill that overtakes the carnival as the mood begins to shift towards the negative. Let them know that their actions are having an overall impact on the mood of the carnival. As for carnival events, there are 3 events that take place throughout the night at the carnival. The first event happens as soon as the carnival starts. Northwind, a treant sapperling, and his awakened squirrel Red walk around the carnival and hand out gifts to the guests. Northwind will rain sycamore seeds down from his branches, and children will try to catch the seeds before they hit the ground. The seeds will then turn into a random gift, and a party member can actually claim one of these gifts. Red will hand out dandelions and ask guests to blow on them and make a wish. If your party makes a wish and blows on a dandelion, make note of it because it will come up later in the adventure. At midnight, the Big Top extravaganza begins. A crowd forms at Big Top and several performances happen on stage with Mr. Light hosting the event. Near the end of the show, Mr. Light will ask the crowd if anyone wants to come up on stage and perform, and this is the party's opportunity to give their performance. If they succeed on a DC 14 performance, they can raise the carnival's mood by 1. If it's a group effort, they can raise the carnival's mood by 3. You can use these group checks to determine who gets crowned the Witchlight Monarch. Just before sunrise and the carnival closes down, they have the event, the crowning of the Witchlight Monarch. Mr. Light will use his scepter to determine who in the crowd will be crowned the Witchlight Monarch. If it's a party member, they will gain the charm of the monarch, and every fey creature within Prismeer will refer to them as Your Highness. You can have a lot of fun with this, especially if you have creatures like the hags. Call them Your Highness because they have to, like there's this reluctance in their voice. That could be really entertaining. There could also be some fun in figuring out why they're being called Your Highness because they probably won't know right away. Real quick, I want to touch on finding Kettlesteam. If the party spends an hour searching for the Kenku and they succeed on a DC 13 investigation, they find Kettlesteam. By this point, Kettlesteam has stolen Candlefoot's voice and is now causing disturbances within the carnival. If the party catches her and interrogates her, they can find out information about the relationship between Witch and Light and the Hourglass Coven, and they can also learn Kettlesteam's relationship to Zybilna. Now, I mentioned earlier that you can have Kettlesteam know the passphrase in order to enter Prismeer, but it's stated that part of the pact that Kettlesteam made with Zybilna is that Kettlesteam cannot enter Prismeer for whatever reason. So Kettlesteam will ask the party to go into Prismeer and find Zybilna, and she'll do everything she can to help. Now let's have a look at some of the carnival locations, starting with the ticket booth. The ticket booth will probably be the first place that your party goes to, and it's run by an elderly goblin with an ear horn. The goblin's name is Nicholas Midnight, and his ear horn gives him advantage on insight checks. Adult tickets cost 8 silver, child's ticket costs 3, and you can barter with Nicholas and perform a favor for him. The first round of tickets is paid for by Eliwick, who the party will meet at the Feasting Orchard. Once the party is inside the carnival, they'll see Big Top and the Calliope. The Calliope is being played by a monkey wearing a coat full of buttons, and if a party member donates a button to the monkey, it could come up later in the adventure. The Big Top is a tent where events take place, and there's a chart in the book about what kind of events could be taking place when the party goes there. Past the Big Top, there is a dressing room, and past that, there's the staff area where Witch and Light are, and the party can overhear a conversation between the two, as well as meet with Burley and Thacko the clown. Veering left from the entrance, we have the Bubble Pop Teapot, which is being run by goblins. The party can play a rhyming game here with a goblin in order to earn Scatterleaf tea leaves, which is a magic item. Otherwise, they can go inside the teapot and get encased in a bubble, which floats around the carnival, allowing them to see the area from a bird's eye view. With a DC 10 acrobatics, they can actually gain control of the bubble. Otherwise, it just floats around in a figure 8. I would use this opportunity to drop the party off where you want them to go. For example, the carousel. If you want them to gain that information about the hag, you can use the bubble to guide the party wherever you would like them to land. You can just have the bubble pop and they'll float down where you want them to be. The Pixie Kingdom has pixies that will shrink the party down to tiny size so that they can explore this Pixie Kingdom run by pixies and awakened animals. They can also play a game of hide and seek with the pixies. The Mystery Mine is run by a dwarf wizard, and characters who ride this mine cart will experience some of their greatest fears and have to start making saves or be haunted by nightmares and start racking up levels of exhaustion. It's unlikely, but there is a chance that a party member could gain enough exhaustion from this ride to die over the course of a few days. You can rule that time moves differently in Prismeer, thereby preventing them from dying from the exhaustion. There's also an opportunity to cure curses within Prismeer, so you can rid them of the nightmares before they kill. Moving on to snail racing. This is a fun one. All the participants of the race get a snail, and the snail moves at 80 feet per round. The snail jockeys have an option to make the snails go faster with an animal handling check, but they run the risk of making the snails go slower if they fail. There's also a surprise table to roll on to spice things up as the race goes on. The track is 480 feet long, and the first place winner gets a potion of advantage. The loser gets a consolation prize, which is a wand that allows them to cast dancing lights. The Hall of Illusions contains several mirrors which act as portals to Prismeer when the passphrase is spoken in front of them. Otherwise, these mirrors will show the people viewing it themselves as a younger version of themselves or as an older version. Right outside the Hall of Illusions, when the party arrives, there is a halfling there proposing to another halfling in front of a mannequin that resembles Tasha. What the halflings don't know is that the mannequin casts Tasha's hideous laughter on nearby guests. Unfortunately, this causes the halfling that's proposing to run away in embarrassment into the Hall of Illusions. Without party intervention, this halfling will be kidnapped by one of the Hourglass Thieves. The person running the Hall of Illusions is Candlefoot, who has had their voice stolen by the Kinku Kettlestein. Candlefoot will try to communicate with the party using gestures, and he'll tell them that his voice was stolen by a Kinku named Kettlestein, and he'll also mention his relationship with the mermaid over at Silversong Lake. Veering right from the entrance of the carnival, you'll find the Lost Property Wagon, which is run by Durlagron, a displacer beast. Durlagron is watching over a couple of children when the party arrives. One of the children picks up an object from the wagon which belonged to Durlagron's child, and Durlagron gets upset and takes the object from the child. The child runs away in fear, and Durlagron will ask the party to go chase them down. You can use the child's movement to sort of guide the party where you want them to go. For example, if you want them to go to the carousel and get that information, the child can veer off towards the carousel and the party can follow him there, and they'll meet Diana Cloppington. When the child is brought back to Durlagron, he'll explain to the party that he himself lost his child to the Feywild some time ago, and his child Star is actually there and can be found while the party is exploring Prismeer. The Dragonfly Rides is run by Northwind and the Awakened Squirrel Red. Here the party can ride a giant dragonfly in a figure 8 around the carnival, possibly looking for Kettlesteam or just enjoying the sights. While the party is there, a dragonfly will actually take off early with a dwarven rider, and the dwarf will be dangling from the harness of the dragonfly dangerously over the carnival, and the party has an opportunity to save the dwarf. thus improving the mood of the carnival. And if they fail, the dwarf will fall onto the top of a tent, lowering the mood of the carnival. Whether this event takes place or not, a rider can roll an animal handling check in order to gain control of their dragonfly and possibly fly it over to the staff area in order to get in that way. As for the panic dragonfly, this happened because the Kinku kettle steam used speak with animals, causing the dragonfly to fly off with its rider. The Feasting Orchard hosts a cupcake eating contest. This one is one of my favorites. Every time you eat a cupcake, you roll a con save, and if you fail, you take some custard damage. Once your custard hit points hit 0, you can't eat another bite. The reward for winning this one is a cupcake that functions like a potion of invisibility. The Gondola Swans is a very simple attraction. An awakened swan will drag the party around in a gondola, following the river around the carnival, while talking to them about some really philosophical topics. If you impress this swan with your conversation, then your debate skills will come up later in the adventure. Silversong Lake is another simple attraction. A merfolk will sing and perform to a group of people on the lake shore. Kettle Steam is here in this crowd and will attempt to heckle the merfolk until she leaves and the event is ruined and the mood of the carnival lowers. If the party convinces her to go back and continue her performance, the carnival's mood will improve more than it was at, and they will gain singing lessons, which will come up later in the adventure. And finally, the carousel, which has an interesting puzzle to it and the opportunity to gain a ton of information about the Hourglass Coven. When the party comes here, they will meet Diana Cloppington, who looks like a centaur, but is actually a human that has been merged with their horse. I have to wonder if she got the name Cloppington before or after she was cursed. Anyway, she was cursed by hags, and if she attempts to tell the party what happened, she starts to cough up brown sap. Instead, she tells the party that they have to learn the names of the unicorns on the carousel in order to earn their trust and thus learn the information about the hags. And she'll give them a pot of gold paint to fill in the names. There's a total of 4 pairs of unicorns, and each pair references a proverb. There's Fortune and Bold, which references fortune favors the bold. Pride and Fall, which references pride comes before the fall. Stone and Moss, which references a rolling stone gathers no moss. And finally, Stitch and Nine, which references a stitch in time saves 9. There is another version of this puzzle for people who aren't familiar with English proverbs. Once the party learns the unicorns' names, they can ride the carousel and be telepathically told about the Hourglass Coven. There will also be some additional details depending on which story hook you chose at the beginning. There's one last attraction that I want to talk about, and that's the small stalls. These 6 games don't have a set location, although you can see 2 of them on the map right next to the mystery mine. Each of these games is based off a specific ability, and you'll roll that ability in order to determine whether or not you win the game. Outstare the Cyclops is probably the easiest of these games. It's a simple DC 14 Constitution check, and you win a prize. And that's all I have for the Witchlight Carnival. I know it's a long and tedious chapter. There's a lot of NPCs, a lot of carnival games, a lot of moving parts, but in my opinion, that's what makes this chapter so much fun. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you know how YouTube works. Hit those buttons, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of the Witchlight Carnival, and if you want to be a part of this D&D community, make sure you join the Discord. Link is in the description. Come by, ask questions, let me know what you think. And as always, I'll see you at sundown.